Today we're going to take a look at participles and participial phrases. So we come back to our work on adjectivals in this unit, and we know that noun phrases can frequently be expanded by different modifiers. So we looked at adjectives, and we've seen them being modified by prep phrases, and also relative or adjectival clauses. Then we're also going to have the possibility of a participial phrase. Later, we'll take a look at infinitive phrases and nouns. So we're going to take a look at this participial phrase today. So take a look at an example when it says, "We enjoyed watching the leprechaun." Well, watching the leprechaun is a gerund phrase. It's the direct object of the verb enjoyed. We enjoyed what? Watching the leprechaun. Collectively, those three words are working as a direct object for that verb enjoyed. If I change the sentence and said, "We enjoyed the leprechaun's dancing," well, dancing is still a gerund, and that's what we enjoyed. And the and leprechauns are simply just modifying the word dancing. If I said we enjoyed the dancing leprechaun, well, now you're enjoying not dancing, but you're actually enjoying leprechaun. And you're like, well, then what's dancing? Well, dancing is kind of like an adjective describing leprechaun. It's a dancing leprechaun, except it's not really an adjective. Well, the problem is the word dancing is actually a verb. It's the ing form of the word dance. So we call this a participle. Participle is our third and final verbal. Remember, a verbal is part verb, part something else, like an infinitive or a gerund. So now we have a participle, which is part verb, part adjective. So as you see the definition, a participle can either be in its passive form, which is en, or it can be in its present form, ing, which basically means we're going to be looking out for ing words, which could be an adjective, but I also might find them in their en form, which sometimes looks like an ed form. They kind of change a little bit. But those are the two forms of a participle, the passive participle and the present participle. This one would therefore be the present participle, a dancing leprechaun. If I said he commanded the crowded dance floor, well, crowded is actually the passive participle because it comes from the verb to crowd. Some people will call it a past participle. That's fine. It's wrong, but that's fine. It's actually called a passive participle. So we use participles whenever we use a verb as an adjective. So I could say my broken cell phone, or the breaking waves, the rotten egg, or the rotting banana, a flooded basement, or a flooding bathroom. We can see both the passive form as well as the present form. ing is the present form, breaking, rotting, and flooding. And then we can see the passive form. Once again, usually it ends in en, but sometimes you might have some weird versions where there's a word like flooded, because there's no such word as flooded. So a participle by itself is typically in front of the noun that it modifies. So we enjoyed the dancing leprechaun. So it sits in front of the noun that it modifies. But a participle, like all of our verbals, infinitives and gerunds alike, can also be formed into a phrase. So I can actually add words with the participle and create what we call a participial phrase. We avoided the hippie playing his tambourine and bongos for handouts. Well, here's my participial phrase. Playing is where it begins as my participle, and then I can add extra words to it. Playing his tambourine and bongos for handouts. And that is what we would call a participial phrase. Here's another one. Mr. Fisher, springing from desk to desk like a grasshopper, spit tobacco juice at the mouthy students. I start with the participle, springing, and then I've added some extra words to it, from desk to desk like a grasshopper. And that entire grouping of words is my participial phrase, all describing Mr. Fisher. You'll notice then when it's a participial phrase, oftentimes it's after the noun. So let's identify the participle in the noun that it modifies in these two example sentences. The angry squealing pig attacked the school children like a scene from an antiquated Hitchcock film. Well, I can see squealing ending in ing. It's not a noun, it's not a gerund. It's actually working as an adjective describing the pig. And then I can see it's an antiquated Hitchcock film. Well, antiquated comes from the verb to antiquate, which means to make old. And therefore it's describing the noun film. Another example. We watched Mr. Shockey pushing his broken scooter into the sunset. Well, here is this participial phrase, pushing his broken scooter into the sunset, all describing Mr. Shockey. So it's an adjective, all describing Mr. Shockey. And then within this, besides pushing, I also have broken. Broken is an individual participle describing the noun scooter. So broken describes scooter, pushing describes Mr. Shockey, and then collectively the whole participial phrase, pushing his broken scooter into the sunset, actually all describe Mr. Shockey. This is a little easier to see on a diagram. So let's go back and diagram these two example sentences so we can understand what a participle looks like as well as a participial phrase.